I think a lot of people have gone into spiritual practices looking within because something in their external life has caused them to feel so disempowered. And I think people stay stuck in this world, or can stay stuck in this world for a long time, because at the end of the day, you can't truly find peace if you're not connected with your power. You can't have peace without power. You also can't really have power without peace. They're kind of two sides of a coin. If you just look for peace as a means of running away from your disempowerment, that is really just another way of avoiding taking authority over your choices, taking responsibility over the decisions that you make. So it's like avoidance, passivity, hiding. Here you also find a lot of addiction, self-sabotage, procrastination, almost like a pathological passivity. Power, on the other hand, if your power is not rooted in peace, then that turns into manipulation, domination, controlling, that sort of thing. When they're not connected, they turn into these shadow polarities of each other. Neither one good, right? And I think a lot of people are disconnected from both their power and their peace because they are not connected to purpose. So what we end up with is this kind of three-sided coin where you can't have one without the other. So we end up with this triangle. I call it the triangle of dominion, where we have peace, we have power, and we have purpose. The way I'm thinking of this is peace is an alignment of your energy across time. So we have this horizontal alignment. Power is a vertical alignment. Those things together, we always get like a crosshair, which is our aim towards our purpose. The tricky thing with this, when it comes to purpose, and the reason you can't have peace or power without purpose, is because you have a purpose. You have a sort of blueprint etched in your soul. And if your energy is not flowing towards the purpose for which it was intended to flow, you'll always be out of alignment. I heard Carolyn Mace use the metaphor of a planet kind of pushing itself out of its orbit. So that's kind of how I'm thinking of that. So you're just out of alignment with the orbit you're supposed to revolve within. And that's why, I mean, just imagine you're a planet, and if you're not in orbit, you're not in your place of power, and you're not at peace. Or if you look at an apple tree makes apples. It has an inherent calling etched in its soul to make apples. So if this apple tree grows up and becomes conditioned into thinking it's supposed to make bananas, you might imagine that it's not feeling very powerful because it's not going to succeed very well at making bananas. If you're not doing the thing that you're supposed to do, you won't feel peaceful or powerful. So that's purpose, which is kind of the crown of this triangle. In the corners, we have peace and we have power. Let's kind of zoom in a little bit on this peace triangle. So imagine you have a timeline. In the center of the timeline, there's this big fat red line going down the middle. This is the present moment. This is where we are here. Over here, you have your past. I'm thinking this is your left and this is your right. So we have going from past to future, present in the middle. And let's say there was a trauma. And I've done hundreds of trauma clearings for my clients in one-on-one sessions. An example I've been using recently is I had a client who was feeling a little lost in his business. And when we dove into that feeling, I took him through some processes to kind of dig up memories, if there have been any kind of traumatic imprints. And we found a memory from when he was 7 years old, got lost in the supermarket. And because that memory hadn't been fully processed, there was still a part of his consciousness that was like reliving that every moment. There was a part of his brain that kept thinking he was still 7 years old and lost in the supermarket. So it keeps generating that same feeling, which then becomes almost like a filter, and it keeps manifesting itself in every area of your life. It becomes like a permanent filter to your experience, which then in this case had manifested in his business. So feeling lost in his business, feeling lost in the supermarket, same frequency, same vibration, same thing. And it's funny because I used to be a business consultant, and I remember thinking that session that, just a couple of years ago, I would have given him some totally different, more like strategic business advice, right? But now we look towards the source of the thing. In this case, turned out to be a memory. But in any case, something like a trauma, a belief, a story, an identity that you picked up somewhere along the way, all of these things become like anchors into the past. You can almost see it visually on this timeline. You're here in the middle, but you got all of these sort of tendrils, these little channels which are draining your energy and funneling that energy, channeling that energy into dead ends, into stuff that isn't happening. This guy is not 7 years old and lost in the supermarket anymore. But because his brain keeps generating an emotional response towards that situation, it's just channeling, siphoning off his energy, trying to do something about something that's not happening. So now if we look at an idea like manifestation, where you have whatever intention you're wanting to create in your life, what determines how quickly you can create change in your life is directly related to how many of these anchors you have into the past. Because each one of those anchors is a channel where because your energy is focused on that, consciously or unconsciously, to that degree is the degree that you keep recreating the past in the present. Does that make sense? You have this energy flowing through you. It literally comes in through the top of your head and through your thoughts and then through your choices. You use your energy to create. You're creating your life in every moment through the consciousness that you hold. So where your attention goes, energy flows, right? So if part of your consciousness is attached to all of these, like maybe hundreds of different stories and beliefs and things from the past, that's draining your energy. That's you're leaking power, right? And now on the other end, on the other half of this timeline, what we basically find is a mirror. You tend to expect from the future what you've already experienced in the past. Your expectation of the future is based on your memory of your history. On the left side of the timeline, you'll experience emotions like guilt, shame, regret, resentment, all this wanting to change the past, right? Wanting the past to have happened differently. If we look on this side of the timeline, we have things like mainly anxiety, right? Anxiety, fear, dread, wanting to avoid things in the future. So anytime you think about the future and you're worried about something, you can just notice that it's an image your mind has projected out on this timeline of something that's not happening. You're having an emotional response to an image your own mind has created because the future is never actually happening, right? Peace, then, is about being able to sever all of these threads, to pull back our energy from the timeline and reconcile it in the place where it actually is, which is in the present. So one of the great teachings from the Seth material, one of Seth's great teachings was your point of power is in the present. So this is where you have all your power, in the present. And as you're able to pull back your energy from all of these anchors where your energy has been leaking, you then connect with your power, which is in the present. So peace is presence, and presence is power. Peace then unlocks power, which brings us then to the next corner of the triangle. If peace is this like horizontal alignment of energy across time, now that we get our energy back, we get into a horizontal alignment towards the source of our power. And whatever you want to call that source, you may call it God, you may call it the universe, you might call it your higher self, infinite spirit, I don't know. But certainly there is a source of power that you're either connected to or not. If we then zoom in on this power triangle, right? So connection. In the teachings of Abraham, they use this analogy quite frequently of like, if you have a vacuum cleaner, then it's pretty good if you got it plugged into the socket. Otherwise, it doesn't matter how fancy vacuum cleaner you have if it's not plugged into the source of its power. So the way you plug into the source, so we got peace, right? Presence, you're plugged in, which means you're connected. Through that connection is then what allows you to receive things like downloads, guidance, inspiration, impulses, connection, clarity, and through that clarity, that energy then is able to be expressed through your choices. Connection, clarity, choice, that is the horizontal alignment with power. Across time, we have forgiveness of the past, faith in the future. This is where we kind of get back to this ancient holy language. Faith, forgiveness. And in the present, we have gratitude. Forgiveness, gratitude, faith, connection, clarity, choices. One of the most powerful things you can know is that whatever energy that you act from, the energy that you act from determines the outcome of the act. So if you think of yourself literally as a channel for energy, you're channeling this energy through the choices that you make. The place you're coming from as you make a choice is much more the determining factor of the outcome of that choice rather than the action itself, if that makes sense. So if you act in fear, you create more fear. If you act from love, you create more love. This is the basic principle. And if you're not present, if you're not in peace, you're going to act from fear, right? So that's where all of this connects. If you're present, you're connected to God, and then you can act from there. When we look at this triangle, I think for me, one of the epiphanies was it kind of explained a lot of the struggles I've had throughout my past, because at different times it's been sort of focused in different areas of this triangle. I've had some periods where I spent a lot of time thinking about my purpose and trying to work towards that, and other times I really needed to figure this peace thing out and so on and so forth. But what's become apparent to me recently is you really need all three, and you need them integrated and unified, because none of them work without the other. You can't have peace without purpose. You can't have peace without power. And same thing goes in all the ways that this structure flows, right? So I mentioned at the beginning, I call this a triangle of dominion, because when you can activate all three corners of this is when you can really step into your true authority that you have in this life, when you can truly step into your purpose and do the thing that you came here to do. You're granted authority over your assignment. You step into dominion over your territory. It's like now that you've gone through whatever initiations that you need to have gone through, it's almost like the divine realms grants you legal rights to this territory for you to rule over, but not dominion in the sense of like, I'm going to dominate and control everything, but more like, here is your area of responsibility that because of the way you have grown and developed, and because we can trust you with this, this is the territory that you're given dominion over. So that's the triangle of dominion. And a lot of my, after 20 years of this stuff, I have found that a lot of my insights and learnings have kind of coalesced into this little triangle. So this is a very important model that a lot of our work revolves around at this time. So I hope that's useful, and I'll catch you next time.